This is Lois Whaley for Women Today and Yesterday. My guest today is Isabel, and I'm going to try not to get her name wrong. Kamlongera.
Yes, that's correct, actually. Kamlongera.
Kamlongera. And Isabel is an AAUW fellow here at Ohio University. Actually, she has a colleague as well who's from India, right?
Yes, correct.
Dee.
Yes, Deepali Sharma. She's also a fellow for this year.
She's someone on vacation currently.
Yes.
Yes. So, Isabel has only come just last August or September to Ohio University, and so you finished your very first semester.
I have. Barely made it, but excited to have gone through that experience.
Oh, yes.
It was wonderful.
Right.
Yeah.
And it probably gets easier, you know.
I'm hoping so.
Right. Well, we're going to see a picture of the map of Malawi, where it is actually in central southern Africa. You see, there's the continent of Africa. Malawi is encircled, and it's in the eastern part of Africa, just not too far from the Indian Ocean, right?
Not too far, yes.
Yes. Have you ever been to the beach?
Yes. Before coming to America, I actually went to Zanzibar.
To Zanzibar.
Zanzibar in Tanzania, yes.
Yes.
So that was quite lovely.
And Zanzibar is in your neighboring country of
Correct.
Mozambique?
No, it's in neighboring country of Tanzania.
Tanzania,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Well, my African geography is a little weak, but I imagine it's really a quite nice beach.
It's beautiful, clear blue sands, well, blue water, white sand.
Yes.
It's lovely. The weather is quite warm. The people are welcoming.
Yes.
I think, which is more or less the culture in the eastern side, because even Malawians are the same.
Yes, well, that's nice. And to travel the world. And on your way here, did you stop en route? Was there a place where you stopped?
Yes, I stopped in Ethiopia.
In Ethiopia?
Yes, I spent a day there. I explored a little bit. I went to the Haile Selassie University just to see, to travel a little bit. It was quite lovely.
Yes. So that's just sort of farther north in, it's kind of close. It's near the Red Sea, isn't it?
I believe so, one of those, and bordered by Eritrea.
Eritrea,
well.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we often hear about some of the countries. Eritrea, I think, is one of the ones where there are often refugees.
Sometimes I think things have gotten fairly better now, but yes, they have had a tough past.
Yes, some kind of civil war.
Yes.
Civil war.
Yes, exactly.
Now, how about your own country of Malawi? Have you had any wartime?
Oh, no.
Oh, good.
I think not since, we gained independence from the British in the 60s, and we had a one-party system up until late 90s when we had the first democratic elections.
So that's fairly recent.
Fairly recent, but other than that, very peaceful country. We haven't had any civil war. I mean, we struggle with the usual development problems, so like hunger, disease, yeah.
Well, that's lucky because nothing like war. I mean, that's
no, we've been very lucky.
Chaos and terrible things happening and all the violence and so on. And there are a lot of countries that have been through that, of course,
Yes.
including the United States. We had our revolution when we fought for independence from England.
Yes.
We were the first guys that did it.
No, it took us many years later.
Yes.
And with negotiation.
Negotiation. Oh, that's good. Right. Yeah. Well, that's. I think the English had learned by the time that Malawi gained its independence that there's a time to say farewell.
Farewell, yes.
Yes.
It was around the same time, I think, as well with Zambia. So the Rhodesian countries, at least, they did. We also don't have a lot of resources that they could hang on to. So we were just, I think, more the part of the place in the sun than anything else. So it wasn't a difficult goodbye.
I wanted to mention actually how we happened to meet. You remember how we happened to meet?
Yes, it was at the Ohio Women's when they were welcoming Geneva to the Women's Center.
The new director of the Women's Center.
Women's Center, yes.
Geneva, and they had a very nice event with lots of good food.
Yes. And the meatballs were yummy.
Yes, and I happened to notice that you had on a name tag, I think, that said
AAUW Fellow.
AAUW
yes.
Fellow.
Yes.
So I right away thought, aha, because I'm a longtime member of AAUW, which is the American Association of University Women.
Women, correct.
And my mother was also a member. Long ago in the 1930s. Okay. She was a university graduate from the University of California in Berkeley in the 1920s. Oh, wow. And she was always quite interested in AAUW. She helped to found branches, as we call the local groups. She helped to found a branch in Fallon and Tonopah, and I think maybe also Hawthorne, Nevada, which is where I grew up, way out west in Nevada. So I was familiar with AAUW before I went to college myself.
Yes.
And have been a member ever since finishing at Stanford in 1951. Wow. So it's been quite a long time.
Yes.
And they have a quite large scholarship program and fellowship, mostly fellowship program and special programs.
Yes.
So in what sense are you an AAUW fellow?
Well, I am one of the few who are lucky enough to get the international fellowship.
An international fellowship.
Yes, for the master's program. So, well, Malawi qualifies because it's one of the requirements that you need to come from a country that's supported, and Malawi was one of them. Somebody that I formerly worked with, who was also a former fellow, is the one who recommended and just said, maybe give this a try, apply.
Yes.
And I applied, and here I am.
Here
thanks
you are.
to AAUW.
Right. Well, I've always found that the international links that AAUW has had over the years have been very fruitful, really. My husband is a historian of European diplomatic history, actually, and he's retired now, of course, from Ohio University. But we made several trips to Europe. We were in both England and Spain. I was able to make connections with the local university women's group. That are part of the International Federation of University Women, which is has quite a few members, around the world in different countries. And that was a wonderful connection for me.
Can you imagine, actually?
Yes. In fact, I remember going to a library in England, close to London, at Kew, where they have the wonderful Kew Gardens. And I went to a library in the nearby town, which is actually called Richmond. In the United States, we think of the state of Virginia, because Richmond is the capital of Virginia. But in England, Richmond is in the southwest, just outside Greater London. So there I was in the library, and there was a little card, you know, on the bulletin board sort of thing. I can't remember whether it actually said London Federation of University Women or what, but it was something I recognized,
yes.
you know, that, my goodness, this must be affiliated with the International Federation of University Women. And there was a welcoming sort of thing, you know, give us a call and come to meetings. So I gave them a call.
And you went to a meeting.
And I went to several meetings that year. We were there for about 7 or 8 months.
Oh, okay.
So I was able to go several times to their local meeting, and you know, one time we went on a house tour, and
Okay.
we had some speakers and that sort of thing, which is what often AAUW meetings are like,
Yes.
too.
Yes.
So.
I'm looking forward to the conference in March. Yes, so I'm going to apply, and then hopefully I'll be able to attend.
Good.
There's, I think it's what I've forgotten the exact phrasing, but it's I think there'll be a few keynote speakers and other fellows or just girls and women from different universities.
Oh, good.
And they'll have workshops and that sort of thing. So
Yes.
I'm hoping that I'll be able to attend that.
Well, whereabouts is it going to be?
I don't know why I'm thinking Maryland. I don't know why I have that in my head.
Anyway, it didn't sort of ring a bell like it was in New York City or Washington, D.C.
No, it might even be in Washington. I think it's at a specific university. That's why I'm right now.
Oh, yes. You remember the name of the university better than the town, probably.
Probably.
The city. Yeah. Right. Well, that's another good thing about AAUW is the workshops and special events that they have.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to go back in history, which is the sort of thing I do.
Okay, great. I'm looking forward to the trip.
This time I talk about having been in London. That was in 1983.
Yes.
You might have been a very young girl.
Not born yet.
Not born yet. In 1983,
No.
when I had made my friends in southwest London. But in 1975, they had the first International Women's Year, which was held in Mexico City. So, of course, you know, that was nearby in the United States.
Yes.
And then they've had 4 since then.
Oh.
One of the meetings was in 1980 in Denmark, in Copenhagen.
Nice.
And then I believe the next one was in Kenya.
Okay.
Yeah, in 1985. And then, unfortunately, so far, the last, they haven't had one for 20 years.
Oh.
They had one in Beijing, in China, in 1995.
Well, it's maybe next year.
Yes. So I was kind of hoping that in maybe 2005 or maybe this year in 2015,
Yes.
they would have another large meeting, but I think they've decided it's better to have
Smaller ones,
smaller
possibly.
meetings. But anyway, in 1980, when the meeting was in Copenhagen, AAUW had a follow-up meeting where people could learn about what had been discussed in Denmark.
Okay.
And like you, I applied to go to the follow-up meeting, which was going to be held in New York City, actually. So I got that permission and some money, you know, for a hotel room and what all. And I went to that meeting, and it was quite interesting. As I say, it was only 5 years after the big first meeting in Mexico City. But one of the things that I remember from that was a realization I'd never really had. And I'm a person who has a great deal of interest in women's groups and things women do,
Yes.
you know. But they were pointing out at one of the workshops that I attended following up Copenhagen that there aren't many pictures of women. Well, or at least there weren't in, in that day and age. There weren't that many pictures of women in like textbooks, you know.
True.
And I said, oh, yeah, I never thought about that before. So as soon as I got home, of course,
You started to research?
I started to look at some textbooks and was suddenly realizing, gee, they're right.
Yes.
There weren't many pictures of women. And in fact, I remember looking at one big fat book that was, it was a general book. And there were a number of pictures in it, like, you know, nowadays. But they were almost all of men. Now, this particular book had been published by a women's group.
Interesting.
So I looked at the front, you know, where it tells all the things about who helped to do this, that, and the other thing. That's how I discovered it. It had actually been printed by some large women's group. And I said, look at all these names. These are all women. So I wrote them a nasty letter. I said, I was just looking at your book, and there's only one picture of a woman in the whole book, and she's a patient in a doctor's office, you know. And I thought,
It's those gendered roles, and it's only when you learn to look through a gendered lens that you realize how many images that we see even in media, even today, portray women in certain types of roles. So as a homemaker, hardly ever as a leader. If they are as a leader, it's as if they're not feminine enough. So it's quite interesting.
Yes. Well, there were plenty of men in this book that they had published, and the man was a doctor seeing this patient who happened to be a woman, but she was the only woman in the book. So that sort of set me on the track.
Yes, I can imagine.
But that was a follow-up, as I say, to one of the international conferences. Of course, they had different kinds of international conferences, and this book, which is about Hillary Rodham Clinton, who is one of the presidential candidates. And she was actually the first lady. She was the wife of President William Clinton in the 1990s. So she went to Beijing in 1995 as first woman. And, you know, gave some speeches and went to workshops and that sort of thing. And it was some of the pictures, like the one I showed you, were actually from later on, from her time as a Secretary of State for President Obama. But you know, so there are plenty of conferences. That's even though we don't have a big international conference anymore. Well, tell me a little bit about your own educational background.
Oh, well, I was born in Malawi, as you know, and then my father got a job in Zimbabwe. So I was in Zimbabwe for my high school, and then from there I went to South Africa for my university.
Oh, you went to South Africa?
For my undergraduate, yes.
What city? What city is it?
I was in Joburg. In
Johannesburg.
Yes, I was in Johannesburg.
Joburg,
yes. That's what we call it. I'm just used to that. I was there for 10 years.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I speak a bit of, I speak my native language, which is Chichewa. And then I learned how to speak Shona, which is one of the main languages in Zimbabwe. And then whilst I was in Johannesburg, I learned how to speak a bit of Zulu and Xhosa, which are two of their 13 official languages.
Oh, my.
Yes. So whilst I was there, I studied communication and media.
Media.
Yes. It was interesting. I loved it. I worked for a little bit for insurance companies. And that's where I started doing some corporate social responsibility work, where I would interact with women who are in, for example, I don't know how to quite describe them. They're homes for HIV patients, but only the cases that the hospitals have given up on. So sometimes there would be women, sometimes it's children, and all they really want is some interaction with the world.
Yes.
And that's why I realized that I'd rather use my communication skills to help people. Because the problem, well, in Malawi, for example, we only have 16 million people, but we're one of the largest affected HIV areas in sub-Saharan Africa. And it's not because we don't have the treatment, but it's because of things like stigma, because of lack of awareness, all issues that I believe that with a little bit of communication and awareness, we can actually curb.
Yes.
So that's when I thought about it and applied to OU and got into the Communication for Development program.
Communication for Development.
Yes.
Do you know how long that program has been going here at OU?
It's fairly new because it's also very unique. OU is actually one of the very few universities.
Very few that actually offer that kind of program.
Specific one. I think 2005. I think, if I'm not wrong, yes.
Right.
I know they have, like, it's still quite, they've only had about 2 or 3 directors, so I think it's quite young.
How large is the program? I mean, what I'm talking about is, I guess you'd think of 2 things, like how many faculty?
For faculty, well, it's interdisciplinary. So
oh, yes, that's true.
So it's pretty difficult to say, but I can tell you in terms of the class structure, like for example, in the first semester, there were about 13 of us. And what is great about the program is that all of us come from different countries.
Oh, yes.
So every day you're in class is a learning experience. I mean, I haven't been to half of the countries, but I've learned so much about how what their culture is like, the problems that they have, you know, their ideas as to what solutions might apply.
Oh, yes.
So it's an exciting program for me personally because I've been able to interact with people from one of my friends from India, from Bolivia, somebody from Guyana. So it's been great in that way.
Yes.
That I would have never met them, but...
Yes. My husband went to Oxford University in England after his army service in Germany, in Europe. And that, of course, again, was long, long, long ago. We were there in 1956, 57 at Oxford. And we discovered that most of the people that we knew were other foreign students.
Yes, it works that way.
Well, they sort of tend to stick together, you know. And so, therefore, you know, we met several people from India, Pakistan, someone from Gold Coast in Africa, I remember, and someone from Germany, and a number of them remain good friends that we've stayed in touch with, you know, over the years. So that it's really nice to have a sort of a miniature United Nations.
Yes, and I had that every day in class, and with the ladies that I'm friends with, at least we're still in contact, and I'm hoping that we'll still be in contact even in the future because it's been a great experience so far.
Well, I don't know. I imagine you're in touch with some of your friends from South Africa that you knew long ago.
Oh, yes, I still am.
Yeah.
Almost all of them. And again, most of them were foreign students.
Were they?
Some, later on, as I started working, I made friends with South Africans, like locals. But at the university I was Monash, South Africa, and it's a campus of the Australian Monash University.
Australian?
Yes. So there were quite a few international students that used to come there. So I ended up being friends with Zimbabweans that I didn't know in Zimbabwe, but we met in South Africa and became friends in South Africa.
Became friends, and now you can be in touch.
Exactly.
Even though you're now in the United States, although you were, I suppose, you mentioned that you had worked in insurance? Or?
Yes.
Yes. But that was in South Africa?
That was, yes, for a little bit after university, just to gain the experience.
Right, of course. Well, it's very important to get some business experience. I finished college younger than most of the other graduates because I had started school earlier than some others and that sort of thing and so on. So I went to New York City where I had my parents had some friends and I was able to stay with the friends for a while and read the newspaper. What could I do as a college graduate?
Yes.
Scarcely anything.
That question, they expect you to have 10 years of experience the day you graduate.
Yes.
It's an interesting one.
It would help to have 10 years. But anyway, I was a file clerk. That was something I could do, you know. And it was an interesting experience. And I didn't know how to type when I went to college. That is to say, I could hunt and peck, as they say, hunt and peck. So I decided it would probably be a good idea to learn to type.
Yes.
Especially if I were going to go on to graduate school and you have to do more papers and what have you. So I went to a night school that was specifically a business school. They taught shorthand as well as typing, and it was pretty close to where I was living, so it was quite convenient, you know, to come back on the subway from southern Manhattan and just go a couple of nights a week to Delahanty Business Institute, which was very close to where my parents' friends lived and so on. It came in quite handy. I also finished school quite early. So I was finished with high school, I think, by the time I was about 15, 16. And my parents didn't feel I was ready to go to university away from home yet. So what I did was I enrolled in a computer programming course. Oh, yes.
Because I used to find it fascinating then. I was pretty good at it, but unfortunately I didn't feel it was the right fit for me.
To continue
with it. Otherwise, well, I'm an old programmer now. I don't know how to program in the new languages, but that's how I also was able to get some freelance work because I could program small things, small programs for small projects. And that was my first experience working within non-governmental organizations that were doing development work. So that was my first exposure, just to know that, okay, this is the type of work that they do, the type of environment. And I enjoyed the fact that, for example, the first program was for hospitals. It wasn't anything major, but just to catalog the hospitals that they have in the Southern African region. So they needed certain specifications, and I was able to do that. It didn't help the people in those regions, but at least I felt like I was contributing. And I enjoyed that aspect of their work, that the reward is not exactly monetary, but in affecting people's lives positively. So I think that's when I always knew that there wasn't a complete fit whilst I was in insurance. But at that point in time, it was the job that I could get, so insurance it was.
And sometimes it's a lucky thing, really. Like computers being so omnipresent now. I mean,
exactly.
To have some specialized... I had a somewhat similar experience when I was a graduate student at Ohio University. I already had a degree, master's degree in education from the University of Michigan, where I met my husband. And so this was later, you know, after we had come to Ohio University, that I decided that I would need or would want at least, a degree in political science, because I'm quite interested in government. And so we left for England. This was a different trip to England. In 1970, we were away a year. And when I came back, I discovered that political science had caught up with the times. And now you were expected to know computers.
Yes.
And that was the day when, before you were born, luckily, when you had to start from scratch each time to make cards.
Yes.
Yeah. And if you made a mistake on point 80, you know, you had to start again from the beginning.
Oh, that's painful.
But then they got smart and invented a machine that would do the typing for you all the way up to 79, and you could make the correction.
Oh, all right.
That was a big step forward, believe me. So, keeping up with technology nowadays, rather difficult, isn't it?
Yes. I got a Christmas card from my mother, who, if I must say, is another inspiration. My mother got her, there are 5 of us, so she had 5 kids. She was a working mother. And after I was born, she went to the UK on a scholarship to do her master's. And she always wanted to do her PhD, but she just never had the time.
Right.
And she finally retired, well, sort of retired from official work when she was 55, and officially started her PhD. It took her 5 years, but on her 60th birthday, I was there as she graduated.
Oh, wonderful.
So yeah, my point is, through that experience, she had to teach herself how to use the modern day computers, and you know, with how Microsoft Word changes all the time. And I was very proud over Christmas because she sent me a card that she made herself using PowerPoint. And she's like, she called me, "Did you get my card? Are you not proud?" And I said, "Yes, I'm very proud. Congratulations." Because she did the whole thing without picking up the phone to ask me. And I mean, it's a real struggle. I might say, yes, it's because of her age, but there are actually people in Malawi that simply don't have access to computers. That now by the time they go to university, they're expected to be able to type, and yet they haven't had exposure to computers from the time they're younger. So,
well, you know, you see these little kids now around here playing with computers when they're 2 or 3 years old.
Yes.
I mean, it's part of their, it's just part of their environment.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and it's a good thing. And because I had to take typing as almost a graduate student, I was very sure that it was important for my children to learn to type in school, which they were able to do at the middle school here in Athens. There were some choices, you know, you could take woodworking, you could take cooking and so forth, you could take sewing, you could take typing. And so I made sure they got typing.
Yes. And I'm sure they're grateful for it.
Although nowadays there's so much texting, and I'm not even familiar with texting, but I don't believe that it's not like a typewriter keyboard, is it?
Well, some phones will have the ASDF structure. Others will have the QWERTY, which is the QWERTY. So it just depends.
It just depends, yeah. And I suppose that's something you have to keep in mind when you go into the store to...
Yes. Well, not really. My dad also has not converted. He simply will not text. He'll call you because he never had the patience to have to learn how to, and then also find his glasses, then figure out which button is which. So he'll just call.
Well, one of my first jobs after I finished my master's degree in education, and by which time we were married, and then my husband was drafted into the Army. This was during the Korean War, which was in the early 50s, 1950s, and so on. And he was at Fort Knox, stationed at Fort Knox, which is not too far from here. You know, the Ohio River is not too far. You get in the Ohio River on a boat and just keep going downstream about, well, it's 150 miles to Cincinnati, and it must be another 100 miles or so to Louisville. Louisville is on the Kentucky side of the river, south of the Ohio River, and Fort Knox is just beyond Louisville, about another 25 miles or what all. But that is a famous place because, have you ever heard of Fort Knox?
In movies.
Yeah. Fort Knox is where the gold is stored.
Okay.
They used to use gold in international finance, you know.
Okay,
You had to pay things in gold
Oh.
for international trade. Well, they went off the gold standard during the Great Depression in the 1930s. So gold wasn't really being used. In fact, it was illegal to use it as international trade for a long time. I think maybe they've gone partly back to using it. So what were they going to do with all the gold? They built a place in Fort Knox, and
Hence the expression, that's my Fort
a
Knox.
big basement, a big basement, very well, you know, surrounded with barbed wire and so forth to make sure that nobody could get in and get the gold.
Okay, all right.
But anyway, they had an army base there at Fort Knox, and that's where my husband went. And so I applied for a job, you know, and the first thing that I got was typing job, because I could type.
You could type.
Yeah. So, and I'll tell you a little story that was sort of funny. When I first went to this job, we were typing out forms, and you mentioned medical, these were medical forms, you know. Every time that a soldier had to be seen for some medical problem, then you'd have to type it all up, and so it would go in his file and so forth. So there we were. There were about 6 of us in this office, and we each had our own typewriter. And that was before the day of widespread use of electric typewriters. So there's the old-fashioned zing, zing, right. And there was a lot of that because you type this and then you have to go down to the next line. And you know what I mean?
Yes, I remember that.
And anyway, when I went there, our supervisor was missing. She was on vacation, actually, and so there were a number of us, both men and women, in this office who were typing these forms, and they kept telling me that she was going to come back, you know, at the end of the week, and they were describing her, and they said she was quite a tall woman, and she had blonde hair, and so forth and so on, and she was a pretty tough supervisor, but fair, you know, all these different things they were telling me about this supervisor. So, on the day when she came back to work, I could see they were kind of looking me over. You know? She walked in. You know, she was a short, dark woman. And this had been a big practical joke. You know?
You were expecting somebody completely different.
Yes, I was expecting someone who looked completely different and so on. I'm from Nevada. And Nevada is where the poker players hang out. Didn't faze me a bit.
You just looked and said, as we were.
Poker face. You know. But I don't think I've ever had another practical joke quite like that one, but it was fun.
That's hilarious.
And it was not anything at all, you know, bad.
Well, for me, it's not a practical joke, though the transition from moving from Africa to here, it's my first time in the States. So my first experience was very, let's just say, different. Everything was upside down. The light switch, instead of on, like in Africa, on would be, you know, it's the opposite. The door opens in the opposite direction. The people drive on the wrong side. So the first week that I was here was quite an interesting transition.
Yes.
I had to keep on trying to figure out which side of the road I should walk on. And then I would imagine if I was home, I would walk on this side. Okay, so go to the opposite side. Everything was...
Well, and the really dangerous thing, which happened to me when we went to England, because obviously you have the English style of driving there in Malawi. I mean, I was almost wiped out by a bus because I looked the wrong direction.
Yes, you see, exactly.
You always, well, you know, you always look one way and the bus is actually coming the other way.
See, now that's what I'm used to.
Yes.
And sometimes I still struggle, but I'm better. I think for the first week, opening my door was a nightmare because every time I'll keep turning it, I'll turn the knob like in the right direction. Here you turn the knob in the left direction. So it was the tiniest things that I just was like,
all those things that are can be, they seem small, but especially they add up, don't they?
Well, they added up, but I'm used to it now. It made the experience memorable.
Yes. Well, it takes a while, but that's what being flexible means, and that's what it's important to do, is to be flexible, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. You have to adjust.
Well, I see you have some notes there.
Oh no, this was just what I needed to remember. So, for example, there I was talking about my field of interest. And that's HIV/AIDS because it's a personal passion. I mean, in Africa, it's taboo to even discuss HIV/AIDS, even though so many people are still being wiped away by the disease.
Yes.
So personally, I have a few family members that have been affected by it. So I've been directly affected by it, and women particularly. Again, as my particular field of interest, struggle to go to hospitals, for example, to get tested. And this is dangerous when they're pregnant.
Yes.
And because mother-to-child transmission is something that's preventable. But because of the stigma associated with being found positive, they hardly ever go for treatment. So they pass it on to the child when it's an absolutely unnecessary occurrence.
Right.
So yeah, that's my field of interest. That's my purpose for being here. Is that hopefully I'll be able to take whatever skills I learn from here to go back home and help those women, whether it's in small groups where they're comfortable, to understand the importance of getting tested, to understand the importance of getting treatment early if they're pregnant and throughout the time they're breastfeeding.
Right.
And also not just the women, but hopefully getting the men in those, because I mean, Malawi is a patriarchy, so it's important to also have the men involved in the process so that they understand that, you know, it's a teamwork. Type of situation.
Yes.
Yeah, so those were just my notes, so just statistics about.
Right, but it's very important, especially where the sexual differences are quite obvious. I mean, men do this, women do that, you know, sort of thing. It's really important for women to have someone like yourself who has had the training, you know, and can speak to them and can be accepted. It can be accepted that you will be talking to the women.
It's not very difficult to be, I mean, because I'm a woman and also because I'm Malawian, for example, it would be easy enough for me to have access to the ladies. The challenge is in whether they're willing to come out and speak to me, because like the stigma of just being known, people still believe in ancient things, like, you know, they don't understand how HIV is transmitted. So sometimes they're associated as a behavior disease. So even if somebody's a victim, everybody's a victim of the disease if they're infected, but they automatically judge that person. So the stigma is an issue that hinders the treatment process, and even more so for the mother-to-child cases. And for me, that's a case where you can save the child. The child does not need to be born positive. But it's getting that message across and getting the women to open up enough to come to speak to somebody like me. And also not just directly in the community, but some of the issues that they have would be the health workers in the community are also judgmental because they're community members. So they all share the same views sometimes. And if you go and get tested, the person who's going to victimize you first is the person who's supposed to give you help. So that makes the experience even worse, and not an experience people are willing to go through. So.
Right. Well, I remember reading from, you know, one of the many groups. Have so many different, I mean, you know, every day I go to the mailbox and stagger home with a bunch of letters from all sorts of groups, most of whom are looking for money, actually. And they're, most of them, very worthwhile groups and need money. But I need some money too.
Yes, don't we all?
But anyway, one of those group letters was mentioning the experience of a woman who discovered that her child had HIV, and I mean, the doctor had told her what the prognosis was and so on, but she couldn't understand it. She couldn't imagine why. Why? And so she and her husband were both tested, and she discovered she was the person who had the HIV, which she hadn't realized, and she had had some sexual relations before with another man who she had expected to marry at the time and didn't, and he later died, and so on. And then she realized that he was the one who had transmitted the disease to her, and she hadn't realized it.
That, yes.
It's, as you say, because of the stigma and so forth, it's really difficult. So you're going to have your work cut out for you.
That's for sure. But my mother says I'm stubborn, so I think I should be okay. For me, it's more about the fact that HIV, yes, fine. HIV/AIDS can lead to people dying once they're in the final stages of AIDS. However, I don't believe that it's a death sentence anymore, because there are treatment regimens that people can actually take on. And for the mothers who are pregnant, it's more so if you want to save your child's life, you have to be on this treatment, because you give your child a better chance for survival. You give your child a chance at a negative life. And also for the mothers, if they are treated, they also can live a long life, just being HIV positive. So it's, in explaining the difference between HIV and AIDS, explaining, that it's your right to actually live, especially in Malawi now. We've got, the money has come, and at least we've got the antiretroviral drugs. They're available. Whereas in the past, we didn't even have access to those. But now they're available. The challenge is the people are still not using them. They're still not accessing all of these facilities that can save their lives. So it will be a challenge to get through to the people to say, hey, don't you want to live a longer life? But hopefully, we'll see how that goes.
Well, you may be able to do an internship here in the States.
I'm hoping so, because I do believe in gaining experience from different environments, because I know my culture, but at the same time, the challenges might always be different. And they would have a better way of dealing with it here. So it would be nice to learn, whether from here or there. Other OU has different programs as well for over summer. So I'm hoping to apply for those and then see where the wind blows.
Yes. Well, OU is quite different in some ways from when, we came about 50 years ago. It was smaller, but it was growing at the time. It was during the Vietnam War, and there were a number of people who were going to college rather than going to war, actually, because student deferment, that sort of thing. So it was growing. It was about 13,000 when we arrived. And that was up considerably from pre-World War II times, of course. And John Calhoun Baker, for whom the Union is named, was a person with international interests, very strong international interests, and he was the president of Ohio University from about 1949 or thereabouts until about 1962, something like that. And so he had increased the interest in international affairs and so on, and it was a growing university. And there was a young president, new president. His name was Alden.
Oh, okay.
These presidents wind up as buildings.
Yes. Now I know which building I'm going to.
And when we came, the Aldens were a young couple, had young children. You know, in fact, Mrs. Alden had a baby while she was here.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Her youngest was born here, and so it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then at the end of, well, the Aldens left in '68, I guess it was, or maybe '69. And then they had this big problem at Ohio University and many universities around the country where the students were upset. War was going on. Students were particularly upset, many of them, because they were of the possibility of themselves having to go to war, you know, so on. And in May of 1970, the United States troops invaded Cambodia, which was a part of French Indochina. Vietnam had been a part. Laos and Cambodia were the other two parts of a four-part system that the French had run for a number of years, for maybe 100 years or so, before leaving in 1954. And then the United States took up, you know, the side of the South Vietnamese against the North Vietnamese. And when President Nixon invaded Cambodia, these protests became, you know, much more outspoken than ever. And there were places around the country where we had an arson fire here in one of the Army offices that was on the campus, for instance. And at Kent State, which is, you know, there are 4 state universities in Ohio. Ohio State University is the big one in Columbus. But in addition, Kent is near Akron and Cleveland. Then there's Ohio University in the southeast. In the southwest, there's Miami University of Ohio.
Oh, okay.
And in the north, near Toledo, is Bowling Green. And they're all, those 4 are sort of, you know, on a par. So at Kent State University, they had protests, and the National Guard was called out, and there was, you know, an unfortunate incident, very unfortunate incident, in which 4 students were killed by National Guardsmen. Well, that really set things off, especially in Ohio. And finally, Ohio, that was May 4th, 1970, the Kent State protest, and it was just later that month that Ohio University closed for until September. This was in May, and it closed until September. The people in the graduating class didn't get diplomas. One of them was President McDavis, because he himself is a graduate of Ohio University, only the second person in Ohio University history who is actually a graduate of Ohio University. And he was in that class, so he didn't get one until he got back here. They had
interesting to know.
They had a special ceremony for him.
For him to get the degree.
Yes, for him to get the degree. And then the university began shrinking. The number of students began shrinking. And it got back down to about 13,000
that's strange.
in 1976. And then things turned around again, and it's been growing ever since. In fact, now it's so large.
Yes. Over the finals week, I saw so many faces I hadn't seen before. The library was constantly full because everybody realized they had assignments, papers, you know, things to study for.
Right. Yeah. Well, and you really notice it between classes when...
Yes, at 12 o'clock.
Hordes of people are crossing the streets, that's for sure. It's quite a different thing. Well, we had talked about when your birthday was
Yes.
in August, right?
September 19th.
September 19th.
Yes.
But I don't think we're going to talk about that for very long because we're just about over.
No, that's all right. That's all right. That went by so quickly.
Yes. Well, we had just a very good discussion, and that's what I like to have.
Well, I hope I contributed somehow.
Oh, yes. Well, it's interesting to learn something about Malawi and your life, and you've learned something about mine.
Yes.
We've talked about the university
Yes.
some and so forth. So I think we can think that we've had a pretty good day, don't you?
Yes, I feel like it was a good day.
My guest this afternoon has been Isabel
Kamlongera.
Kamlongera from Malawi, which is in South Central Africa, kind of near the Indian Ocean.
In the middle of Mozambique.
In the middle of Mozambique. At least it's surrounded on a couple of sides. And it used to be an English protectorate, I think.
Yes, we were called Nyasaland at the time.
Yes. For a long time it was an English protectorate and was part of what was once known as Rhodesia, named for Cecil Rhodes, the African entrepreneur who found diamond mines and things like that.
Yes.
Right. Do they have diamonds in Malawi?
No, we just
No.
have a beautiful lake, which is a third of our country. So that's
Oh.
our pride.
Right. What's it called?
Lake Malawi.
Lake Malawi. I wonder why.
I know, but it's beautiful. It's clear blue waters again. It's beautiful. I can't even describe it. It's worth visiting.
Do you live near it? Is your home near the
No,
lake?
sadly, up in the south on a plateau. So we have the beautiful weather, the beautiful breeze, and the beautiful scenery, but no lake, sadly.
No lake.
No lake.
But you can always go up there for vacation.
Oh, I'm always there. I make sure I go to the lake at least every
Yes.
time I'm home.
Right, and your program is?
Communication and Development. I'm with the Center of International Studies, and I'm doing my master's.
Right, and she's an AAUW
I am a
International
proud
Fellow.
AAUW International Fellow, 2015-16 year.
Yes. Thanks again. This is Lois Whaley for Women Today and Yesterday.